Sword Art Online is a colossal failure, and it's infuriating that anyone considers it to be a standout anime. From the get-go, it's a chaotic jumble of terrible writing and glaring plot holes that make you question the intelligence of anyone who enjoys it. The characters are a total joke, with Kirito serving as a bland, overpowered mess who strolls through challenges without breaking a sweat. It's like the creator slapped together a bunch of lazy ideas and expected us to cheer for this dumpster fire. Instead of an epic adventure, we're treated to a mind-numbing sequence of cliches and nonsensical decisions. The game design is atrocious. The stakes are non-existent, and any emotional moments are utterly cringeworthy. It's astonishing that this train wreck has such a large fanbase, when it clearly has nothing of substance to offer. I'm gonna break down the flaws of each arc, starting with the awful Aincrad arc.
It's the year 2022, and the first full-dive virtual reality MMORPG called Sword Art Online is launched. Using a Nerve Gear device, players can immerse themselves into the game and control their avatars with nothing but their own thoughts. However, Sword Art Online's 10,000 players quickly find out that they're unable to log out of the game. The game's creator, Akihiko Kayaba, has trapped everyone. The only way to escape is to clear all 100 floors and defeat the final boss. Furthermore, dying in the game also means dying in real life, since the Nerve Gear will fry the player's brain. In this video, I'll break down the Sword Art Online anime series. Let's get started. The anime begins on Sunday, November 6, 2022, which is the launch day of the world's first virtual reality MMORPG Sword Art Online, also known as SAO. 10,000 copies of the game have been sold, which doesn't really make any sense from a financial standpoint. It probably cost several $100 million to develop and create Sword Art Online. It cost $63 million to develop World of Warcraft, and that's just a standard MMORPG and not a full-dive virtual reality game. If they only managed to sell 10,000 copies of Sword Art Online on the opening day, then it would be a complete flop money-wise, since most of the sales come from when the game is first released. A young 14-year-old beta tester named Kazuto Kirigaya, or Kirito in-game, uses a Nerve Gear and logs into Sword Art Online. Kirito quickly befriends an inexperienced player named Klein and teaches him some of the basic game mechanics, such as the sword skills. It's good to make friends with other players, since MMORPGs aren't meant to be played solo, and there will usually be a lot of group content to do in the game. We learn that you can't feel any actual pain in Sword Art Online. Moreover, the game also has an unlimited number of skills, except for magic. An MMORPG without magic would be pretty boring to play, since everyone would be forced to use melee weapons. So this is definitely a bold decision, as Klein stated. A few hours later, Kirito and Klein sit down to take a break from their training. Klein mentions how this is his first time using a Nerve Gear, but Kirito is way more lucky since he got to beta test Sword Art Online. Only 1,000 people got the chance to beta test the game. Kirito says he got all the way up to floor 8 during the beta, and it took him 2 months. Klein ordered a pizza in real life and attempts to log out of the game to go eat it since he's really hungry. But Klein was playing Sword Art Online for the past several hours. When did he get the chance to order a pizza in the real world? Klein notices that the logout button is missing from the menus. He isn't too bothered by this though. It's the first day of the game, so there are bound to be some bugs and glitches in the game. Klein isn't wrong about this. There are definitely a ton of problems during the first day of an MMORPG, but the basic game functions like the logout button should be there. It would be a pretty awful game if it was missing a logout button. Klein contacts one of the game masters for help, but there's no response. Kirito and Klein can't find another way to log out of Sword Art Online. You aren't able to manually pull the Nerve Gear off your head since your body is unconscious in the real world, and you can't force close the client like you would a normal MMORPG since you don't have a keyboard in the game. Suddenly, Kirito and Klein are forced teleported to the town of beginnings. All the other players in the game have also been teleported here too. Sword Art Online's creator, Akihiko Kayaba, appears and tells the players what's really going on. The logout button has been removed from the game's menu on purpose. The players can't log themselves out of Sword Art Online, and nobody from the outside world can remove the Nerve Gear from their heads. If anyone tries to, then a transmitter inside the nerve gear will discharge a microwave signal to the player's skulls and kill them. How did the nerve gear manage to make it past the product testing stage with such a fatal design flaw? Someone should have noticed this glaring issue during the production process, and something should have been done about it. Maybe using an EMP can disable the nerve gear device and allow it to be removed from the player's head without killing them. The government could also hire some people to hack into Sword Art Online source code and re-enable the logout button. They can find the employees who worked for the company that created Sword Art Online to get access to the source code. It's not like Sword Art Online was created by one person, so there should be hundreds or thousands of other employees. Cutting the power won't work since the nerve gear has an internal battery. 213 players have already died since their family and/or friends have attempted to remove the nerve gear from their heads. However, a user on Reddit calculated that the nerve gear can't actually kill a player fast enough to be a threat, so taking it off shouldn't be a problem if we're going by real-world physics. Akihiko Kayaba then tells the players that there is no longer any way to revive someone in the game. If a player's HP drops to 0, then their avatar will be deleted from the system forever, and the nerve gear will simultaneously destroy their brain. In other words, if the players die in the game, they will also die in real life. And they only have one life as well, since you can't revive players. I sure hope that Japan has good Wi-Fi, because it would suck if you died due to lag or a lost connection. I also feel bad for those 213 players who already died because someone tried to take the nerve gear off. Akihiko Kayaba should have made this announcement a lot sooner to prevent that from happening. There's only one real way for the players to escape Sword Art Online. They have to clear the whole game and defeat the final boss on floor 100. The players' in-game appearances are then changed to their real-world appearances since the nerve gear was able to scan their bodies in real life. As expected, most of the female characters are actually guys in real life. A bunch of people also lied about their age and are really young. Akihiko Kayaba wishes the players good luck and vanishes. The tutorial is over and their death game officially begins. Panic ensues, but it's important to stay calm and think rationally in this situation. Kirito and Klein go to an alley and discuss a strategy. Kirito plans to head out for the next village since the fields around the town of beginnings will be hunted clean soon. There's limited amount of money and experience to go around. If they head to the next village now, then they'll have an easier time collecting cash and points. This doesn't make much sense. Why is there a limited amount of money and experience? In typical MMORPGs, monsters and resources simply respawn, so you can keep farming one spot forever. There's an infinite amount of resources. You don't need to leave and go to another location. Klein can't go with Kirito since his friends from another game are still at the plaza, and he doesn't want to leave them behind. Kirito and Klein part ways, and Kirito goes on his own. This is not a good choice. It would be better to work together since you'll have strength in numbers. This isn't a battle royale tournament like the Hunger Games or the Belko experiment where only one person can win in the end, so teaming up is the optimal strategy. Surviving in Sword Art Online isn't too hard if everyone is working together. You can easily die if you're doing things by yourself, but if you have other people with you, then they can help you and protect you. All the players in the game should be grouping up instead of going solo. Kirito could have just joined Klein's guild and shared his knowledge of the game with the other players. There's a 1-month time skip and 2,000 players have already died so far. The players are still stuck on floor 1 since they can't even find the boss room. How did so many players die? This is only the first floor, so things shouldn't be too difficult yet. And the players haven't even found the boss room, so it's not like the players were killed by a strong floor boss. You would have to purposefully try to die if you want to get killed. Moreover, it shouldn't be too hard to find the boss's location. It has to be in one of the towers that lead to the next floor. It's not going to be in a random building or anything. Kirito is a beta tester, so he should know better. Sword Art Online had 1,000 beta testers in total, and assuming that most of them returned to play the real game, then the players should have progressed much further than floor 1 in a month's time. In the first episode, Kirito said that it took him 2 months to get to floor 8, and he thinks he can do that in a month now. Sure, there are a few small differences between the actual game game and the beta, but the core mechanics and gameplay such as the boss locations should be the exact same in the real game as well. There's a meeting organized by a player named Diavel to figure out how to defeat the Floor 1 boss. Diavel says that his party found the boss room at the top of the tower today, and they have to beat the boss so they can give hope to everyone else in the Town of Beginnings. If you want to play it safe and have a guaranteed way to survive the death game, then you can just stay in the Town of Beginnings forever and let the other players clear the floors. You don't actually have to do anything or fight any of the bosses as long as some other players are willing to do that. We know that there's a hunger system in Sword Art Online, but nobody ends up dying from hunger, so they should be fine. Diavel tells everyone to team up into parties of 6. A typical party doesn't stand a chance against a boss, so they need a raid group made up of multiple parties. Kirito teams up with a mysterious girl in a red hooded cloak named Asuna since everyone else has already formed a party together. Another player named Kibao interrupts the meeting and blames the beta testers for leaving everyone else behind. This is the dumbest decision ever made. The beta testers are the most knowledgeable and experienced about Sword Art Online since they've played it before and know how everything works on the lower floors. You shouldn't ostracize and blame the beta testers. It would be a lot better if everyone worked together to beat the death game. All the players are stuck in Sword Art Online, so they should set their differences aside and combine their efforts. It would be way more effective to do that. A player named Aegil shows Kibao and the others that the beta testers actually helped everyone by writing guidebooks. They were handing them out for free, so the beta tester shouldn't be at fault for the other players' deaths. Finally, we have someone who's using their brain. Aegil is right. The beta testers aren't responsible for everyone else. They try to help by sharing their knowledge of the game, but they can't do much if the other players aren't following the information they provided. It's not their problem if people don't read the guidebooks and then die by doing something stupid. The guidebooks are valuable resources. It's important to always study the guidebook before doing something risky or unknown so you're more prepared. According to the guidebook, the Floor 1 boss is named Ilfang, the Kobold Lord. He'll be surrounded by his minions, the ruined Kobold Sentinels. Ilfang, the Kobold Lord, carries an axe and a buckler. He has 4 health bars, and when the last one turns red, he'll switch to a curved sword-type weapon called a Tall War. Ilfang, the Kobold Lord, can also change his patterns of attack, so you should watch out for that too. The meeting is adjourned and Kirito sits with Asuna during the night. Asuna explains that she would rather fight than slowly rot away in the Town of Beginnings. That's why she's here. The next morning, the characters go to the boss room and fight Ilfang, the Kobold Lord. The players are doing good and following the strategy they planned beforehand. However, Diavel tries to attack the boss alone, but it turns out that Ilfang, the Kobold Lord, is actually using an Odachi, not a Tall War like in the beta. Diavel gets hit and Kirito tries to give him a healing potion. However, Diavel doesn't take the potion and dies. Diavel should have taken the potion from Kirito. He would still be alive right now if he just healed himself back to full health. There's no good reason why he wouldn't accept the potion. Also, as we learned in the first episode, players in Sword Art Online aren't supposed to feel any pain, so why do they always react like they're in pain? They shouldn't have any reaction at all. Before dying, Diavel reveals that he was also a beta tester, and he was trying to get the last attack bonus item from the boss. This isn't a good game mechanic at all. Rewarding players for getting the last attack on the boss would heavily discourage teamwork and make it a dirty free-for-all. Everyone who participated in the boss fight should receive equal loot. That would be the most fair and balanced. Kirito works with Asuna, and together they manage to finally defeat Ilfang, the Kobold Lord, with the help of the other players. Kirito obtains the Coat of Midnight as the last attack bonus item. Why doesn't the boss actually drop anything though? The best items in MMORPGs always come from boss drops. If the bosses don't drop anything, then where do the players get the best gear in Sword Art Online? Even if the bosses dropped something, you can't keep farming them over and over again since they don't respawn. So Sword Art Online's game mechanics clearly weren't well thought out. The players start to celebrate, but Kibao blames Kirito for Diavel's death. The other players agree with Kibao and call Kirito a beater, which is a combination of the words beta tester and cheater. Kirito admits that he was indeed a beta tester, and he also makes fun of everyone else to accept the hate. This was not a smart choice. Now the other players hate the beta testers even more than they used to. Kirito should have stayed calm and defended himself. He could have explained that he didn't know what was going to happen since the actual game is a bit different from the beta. Therefore, it's not his fault Diavel died. Kirito put a huge target on his back for no reason and made the whole situation even worse. He was trying to divert the hatred of beta testers toward himself, but this plan will surely backfire, and the other players will also end up hating every beta tester in Sword Art Online. This is why you need to think rationally before making such a big decision. Afterwards, Kirito puts on his coat of midnight. He disbands the party with Asuna and walks through the door to floor 2. Kirito should stay in the party with Asuna. They seem to be getting along and working nicely together, so Kirito should not have left. Asuna wasn't one of the players who blamed Kirito for Diavel's death, so she doesn't hate him. As mentioned before, there's strength in numbers, so you should group up with other players to have a better chance of surviving the death game. Going solo is the worst choice since everything is going to be way more dangerous and it's going to be harder to keep yourself alive. There's another time skip of several months and Kirito has joined a small guild called the Moonlit Black Cats. The guild consists of the leader Keita, Sachi, Tetsuo, Sasamaru, and Ducker. They were all part of their high school's computer club in real life. Kirito is much higher level than the others, so he keeps his true level a secret and lies saying that he's level 20 when he's actually level 40. Players in Sword Art Online shouldn't be able to hide their levels. It doesn't provide any positive benefits and only exists so people can lie about their real level. This would also be extremely broken and unbalanced in PvP. Imagine having to fight another player and not even knowing what their level is. Moreover, Kirito shouldn't be wasting his time joining a lower level guild. He would be a lot more useful on the front lines fighting the bosses and clearing the floors. The players should be focusing on beating the game. Also, it should be blatantly obvious that Kirito is much higher level than the other Moonlit Black Cats guild members since he does way more damage than them and has a lot more HP. Plus, Kirito's gear and equipment is way better. During the night, Kirito goes out to train when the other Moonlit Black Cats guild members are sleeping so he can continue to level up in secret. If you don't have to sleep in the game, then why does anyone do it? The players should all be training instead of sleeping so they level up and beat the death game quicker. Kirito encounters Klein and his guild, who are also training, but he doesn't talk too much. Klein thinks that Kirito is still dwelling on the past. On his way back into town, Kirito receives a message from Keita about Sachi going missing. Kirito uses his tracking skill and locates Sachi sitting underneath a bridge. She confesses that she's afraid of dying, but Kirito assures her and promises Sachi that she won't die. If Sachi is so afraid of dying, then she can just stay in the town of beginnings forever. She doesn't have to fight any monsters and risk her life. The next day, Keita goes to the town of beginnings to buy a house for the rest of the guild. The other members of the Moonlit Black Cats decide to go to a dungeon on a higher floor. This is a bad decision. They should stick to their usual hunting spots. Sure, you'll get more money and loot on a higher floor, but it's also a lot more dangerous. It's not worth the possibility of dying. It's better to keep things slow and steady. Surviving in Sword Art Online should be easy if you don't make any foolish choices. Additionally, you should be over-leveled for everything. Don't go to a higher floor unless you're way past the recommended level, and no, you can't die. Kirito should say something and reveal his actual level so the other Moonlit Black Cats members will listen to him. They're way too overconfident and arrogant since Kirito has been protecting them this whole time and giving them a false sense of security. The characters find a hidden room with a treasure chest. Ducker tries to open the chest, but this triggers a trap. An army of monsters is summoned and the door closes. The Moonlit Black Cats are locked inside the room. They're also unable to teleport out since this is an anti-crystal zone. The anti-crystal zones are another example of bad game design. Players should at least be given a warning beforehand that they won't be able to teleport out of the room. It's unfair if you can't teleport or leave the room because the only other option is to die, unless you somehow defeat all the monsters in the room, which is highly unlikely. Kirito watches help helplessly as the rest of the Moonlit Black Cats members, including Sachi, are killed by the monsters in the room. This is exactly why going to the higher floor was not a smart choice. Additionally, the Moonlit Black Cats could have tried using some of their healing potions. They probably have some, so they could have used them now to keep themselves alive. Kirito should have also used some of his area of effect skills so he could kill more monsters at the same time. In the first episode, we were told that the game has an unlimited number of skills, except for magic, so using this logic, there should be a bunch of area of effect skills that the player can use. Furthermore, the other Moonlit Black Cats members could have quickly gotten behind Kirito so the monsters would only attack him. Kirito could then kill the monsters without anyone dying. Maybe it would be possible for the players to hide inside the treasure chest. You can't destroy environmental objects in Sword Art Online because they're treated as immortal objects, so they might be safe inside the treasure chest and they could wait until the monsters despawn. There's yet another time skip of several months, and it's Christmas now. Kirito hears about an event boss called Nicholas the Renegade from an information broker named Argo. Nicholas the Renegade might drop an item that can revive a dead player, but in the first episode, Akihiko Kayaba explicitly said that there was no way to revive someone in the game, so it doesn't make sense how this item can exist in the game. Why would Akihiko Kayaba say there's no way to bring someone back to life when there actually is a way to do that? Akihiko Kayaba created the Sword Art Online game, so he should know what items are in it, especially something as powerful as a revival item that can bring players back to life. Kirito plans to go after Nicholas the Renegade alone so he can get the revival item. In a flashback scene, it's shown that Kirito went back into town and told Keita what happened to the rest of the Moonlit Black Cats members. Keita was so overcome with sadness and grief, he committed by jumping off the ledge. Kirito should have tried to stop Keita when he stood up on the ledge. He might have been able to save Keita in time. Also, Kirito could have waited until they were in a safe place to talk so Keita wouldn't jump off the ledge, and Kirito goes to the Forest of Wandering on floor 35. He encounters Klein and his guild. Klein tries to get Kirito to stop playing solo and encourages him to join his guild. Anyone who receives the drop gets to keep it. No hard feelings. However, Kirito declines the offer because he needs to get the revival item himself to bring Sachi back to life. Another high-level guild called the Holy Dragon Alliance also comes. Klein and his guild hold them off while Kirito fights Nicholas the Renegade alone. Kirito successfully defeats Nicholas the Renegade and obtains the revival item, which is called the Divine Stone of Returning Soul. Kirito is lucky he survived the fight. Taking on an event boss by yourself isn't a good option. If Kirito wasn't so overpowered and had plot armor, then he would surely be dead. Unfortunately, the Divine Stone of Returning Soul is only able to bring back a player within 10 seconds of their death, so Kirito can't use the revival item on Sachi since she died several months ago. But now we know for a fact that there's a small grace period between a player dying in the game and dying in real life. Maybe it would be possible for the people in the real world to destroy the nerve gear within the small grace period. This should save the players from getting killed since the nerve gear will be off their heads before it can discharge the microwave signal into the player's skull. Kirito gives the Divine Stone of Returning Soul to Klein and tells him to use it on anyone if they die in front of him. Kirito should keep the revival item himself. He might meet another player he cares about in the future, and he can use it to bring them back to life. Why would you give away such a powerful and one-of-a-kind item? I would definitely hold on to a rare and unique item like this. The Divine Stone of Returning Soul is never brought up again for the rest of the series, so we're not sure if Klein even used it on someone. Kirito could have also sold the revival item if he wasn't going to use it. It's definitely worth a lot of money since it can bring people back from the dead. Kirito could get a fortune if he sold the revival item. Kirito should join Klein's guild now. As stated before, there's strength in numbers. Kirito would have a much easier chance of surviving if he teamed up with Klein and the others. There's no good reason to play solo. Klein isn't even mad or upset that Kirito left him on the first day, so I'm not sure why Kirito is still living in the past. past. Klein and the others know Kirito's true level, so there's nothing to hide from him. They're also a lot more experienced and skilled than the Moonlit Black Cat's members, so they probably won't fall for any simple tricks or traps. Kirito goes back to the room and receives a pre-recorded message from Sachi. She sent the message before she died and wishes Kirito a Merry Christmas. Sachi tells Kirito not to blame himself if she dies, and to keep on living so he can see the end of this world. Sachi knew how powerful Kirito was since she saw his real level when he wasn't looking. It kind of is Kirito's fault that the other Moonlit Black Cats members died though. He should have said something from the start and prevented them from going to the higher floor. Kirito knew that it was going to be dangerous, but he didn't say anything. The message ends with Sachi singing the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer song, and Kirito sobs. However, Sachi's message has given him the strength to continue fighting and hopefully beat the death game. There's another time skip of a few months. A young beast tamer girl named Silica is fed up and decides to leave the party. On the way back to town, Silica gets ambushed by a bunch of strong monsters. Silica shouldn't have gone off by herself. If she really didn't want to be in that party anymore, then she could have waited until she got to a safe area to leave the group. You don't want to take any chances in this death game. Silica is out of healing crystals and is nearly killed by the strong monsters. However, Silica's pet dragon Pina sacrifices itself to protect her. Instead of staying and fighting, Silica could have simply ran away. It seems like pets are a big deal in Sword Art Online. They can heal you, help you fight in a battle, and protect you. Why don't the other players in the game also have a pet? In one of the earlier episodes, it was stated that there are no classes in Sword Art Online, so it's not like you need to pick a Beast Tamer class when you start the game or anything to receive a pet. Kirito comes and saves Silica in the nick of time. Kirito tells Silica to stop crying because it might be possible to bring Pina back to life by using the feather it left behind. There's a field dungeon on the south side of floor 47 called the Hill of Memories. The flower growing at the top can revive familiars. Kirito could go himself, but the flower won't bloom unless the familiar's master is also there. There's a 3-day time limit, and Silica won't be able to get strong enough to reach floor 47 in that time since her level is too low. Kirito gives Silica a bunch of free equipment to boost her levels. He also offers to tag along with Silica since she looks like his little sister in real life. It's nice to help other people, but as mentioned before, Kirito would be a lot more valuable fighting on the front lines and clearing the higher floors. He shouldn't be wasting his time on the lower floors helping these random players. The main focus should be on beating the death game as soon as possible. Furthermore, Silica doesn't really look like Kirito's sister, so I don't know why he said that. Silica and Kirito form a party and head back into town together. They rest at an inn, and Kirito explains some of the game's mechanics to Silica since she's new to MMORPGs and Sword Art Online is her first game. Players who commit crimes against other players will have an orange cursor, and they'll be branded as a player killer. Since dying in the game also means dying in real life, these player killers are actually killing people in the real world. Killing other players in Sword Art Online is not a good choice because your appearance in the game is the exact same as your real-life appearance. Those player killers in Sword Art Online will have to face the consequences in the real world. Furthermore, Kirito tells Silica some more details about floor 47 during the night. The next day, Kirito and Silica arrive at the flower garden on floor 47 and go to the Hill of Memories. Kirito mentions how his little sister is actually his cousin. Kirito is helping Silica right now because, in a weird way, it feels like he's paying his little sister back since she took up kendo after Kirito quit and promised to train hard enough for the both of them. After defeating some monsters, Kirito and Silica successfully retrieve the revival flower. Kirito tells Silica to use the flower later since there are a bunch of strong monsters nearby. They walk back into town together but encounter a player named Rosalia, who is part of Silica's former party. It turns out that Rosalia is the leader of an orange guild called Titan's Hand. Rosalia's cursor is green because she finds the victims and lures them to the orange players for the ambush. It's a simple trick. Kirito reveals that he was looking for Rosalia in the Titan's Hand guild. 10 days ago, they attacked another guild called the Silver Flags. The leader survived, but the other players didn't. The leader begged the high-level players to avenge his dead friends. He didn't want Rosalia and the Titan's Hand members killed. He wanted them to go to prison. In other words, Kirito was using silica as bait this whole time. Rosalia says that she kills other players in the game because there's no proof that they actually die in real life. But there is a lot of proof. If players didn't die in real life when they died in the game, then people in the real world would have removed the nerve gear from the players' heads by now. The only reason why that hasn't happened yet is because the nerve gear does kill the players. Or at the very least, the government would have shut the game down. Nobody would be playing Sword Art Online anymore. Since that's not the case, it goes to show that players really do die in real life if they're killed in the game. The other Titan's Hand guild members come and Kirito fights them alone. It turns out that Kirito is a much higher level than the other players. He literally doesn't have to do anything. Kirito just stands there and his battle healing skill is able to out-heal all the damage from the Titan's Hand guild members. So they could attack him all day and it wouldn't do anything. This is so broken and unbalanced. One player shouldn't be able to take on an entire guild by himself. Moreover, how does Kirito manage to become so high level when he's playing solo and always wasting a lot of time on the lower floors helping the weaker players? It doesn't make much sense. If it's this easy to become high level, then most players in Sword Art Online should also be high level. It's not impossible for a solo player to become high level, but they would have to work extra hard since they're on their own. Kirito doesn't do that, and yet he still manages to become incredibly powerful. Kirito sends the Titan's Hand guild members to prison using a warp crystal. The Titan's Hand members could have teleported away using their own crystals. Afterwards, Kirito and Silica return to town. Kirito admits that he was using silica as bait to catch the Titan's Hand guild. Silica doesn't mind though because there was no other way she would have gotten the revival flower. Silica uses the revival flower on the feather and brings Pina back to life. She promises to tell Pina about the adventure she had with Kirito. What happens if you use the revival flower on a player who's dying? The flower could work the same as the divine stone of returning soul, so it's worth a shot. A month later, there's a meeting on floor 56 between the assault team. They come up with a plan to defeat the boss. Asuna is now the second in command of the Knights of the Blood Oath, one of the strongest guilds in the game. Therefore, everyone else has to obey Asuna's orders. How did Asuna become so powerful though? Last we saw, she didn't even know how to see another party member's HP. Another month later, Kirito is relaxing in a field on floor 59. Asuna comes and scolds Kirito for being lazy, but he says that it would be a waste to clear a dungeon when the weather is so nice this time of year. Asuna thinks that every day in Sword Art Online is equal to a day lost in the real world, but Kirito disagrees since they are not in the real world right now. They're alive in the game, so they should enjoy the moment. Kirito tells Asuna to lay on the grass, and she also falls asleep quickly. Sometime later, Kirito wakes up and watches over Asuna's body as she sleeps to keep her safe. Asuna offers to buy Kirito a meal in return. Sleeping is a total waste of time. The player should be training and leveling up so they can beat the death game as fast as possible. Kirito might not mind being stuck in Sword Art Online and actually enjoy the moment, but I'm sure that most of the other players have lives and families outside of the game. They need to escape as soon as they can. Also, once again, how does Kirito manage to become so high level? Thus far, we've seen him wasting time on the lower floors helping the weaker players and relaxing in a field when the other assault team members are busy clearing the dungeons. He's never training or leveling up his skills. Kirito and Asuna go to a restaurant in town to have dinner. We find out there's something called sleep PKing in the game. A sleep PKer can find someone who's sleeping and make them press the OK button for a duel. This is a really awful game mechanic and would make Sword Art Online very frustrating to play. day, so players can't even sleep in peace because they might die and lose their stuff. A player should have to be conscious to accept a duel. This is yet another reason why players shouldn't sleep at all. Kirito and Asuna hear someone screaming and run into the plaza. A player is being killed, but this is a safe zone, so that shouldn't be possible. Kirito and Asuna are unsure how this could have happened. They think that it was a duel, but nobody else nearby had the winner icon. Kirito and Asuna decide to work together and solve this mystery. This is totally unnecessary. Kirito and Asuna should be fighting on the front lines and clearing the floors. This isn't their job. Other lower level players can investigate what's going on. Kirito and Asuna talked to a girl named Yoruko. She knew the player who died. His name was Kynes, and they used to be in the same guild together. Yoruko and Kynes came to town together to have dinner, but they got separated in the plaza. Kirito and Asuna then walk Yoruko back to her lodge. Kirito and Asuna go to Aigil's shop since he has an appraisal skill. They show him the murder weapon, which is a spear called Guilty Thorn. A player named Grimlock made it. Kirito tries to hurt himself with Guilty Thorn, but Asuna stops him. They need to find out what Guilty Thorn is capable of though, so Asuna shouldn't have stopped Kirito. Kirito and Asuna leave Guilty Thorn with Aigil and talk with Yoruko the next day. She knows who Grimlock is and says that he was also in the same guild as her and Kynes. Yoruko then tells Kirito and Asuna how her guild was destroyed. The guild was called Golden Apple. 6 months ago, they killed a rare monster that dropped a powerful ring that was capable of raising a player's agility skill by 20. Some of the guild members wanted to keep the ring, but others wanted to sell it and split the earnings. They voted, and it was 5-3 in favor of selling the ring. The guild leader, Griselda, took the ring to a town on the front lines to try and sell it, but she never came back. The guild members later found out that Griselda died, and they don't know how or why it happened. However, they know that the killer has to be someone who knew about the ring, so it's one of the 7 other Golden Apple Guild members. Yoruko then informs Kirito and Asuna on who Grimlock is. He was Griselda's husband in the game, and they were a great couple. It's highly likely that Grimlock is responsible for Griselda's death. In real life, most murders are committed by a spouse or a loved one, so it's probably the same here in Sword Art Online. Yoruko and Kynes both wanted to keep the ring for the guild. The other player who also voted to keep the ring is a tank named Schmidt. Kirito and Asuna know who Schmidt is. He's currently in the Holy Dragon Alliance Guild and the leader of the defense unit. Kirito comes up with a few theories on how a murder in the safe zone could have happened. First, it's possible that it was a fair duel. Second, it was due to a bug. Third, they used something to bypass the protection of the safe zone. On second thought, Kirito doesn't think the third theory is plausible because it's unfair and the rules of Sword Art Online are supposed to be fair for everyone. Are they though? Sleep PKing doesn't seem very fair at all. Furthermore, Kirito was able to take on an entire guild by himself in the previous episode. That doesn't seem very fair and balanced for the other players. And what about those 213 players who died because someone took the nerve gear off their head in real life? That was not a fair way to die at all. Kirito, Asuna, and Yoruko then talk with Schmidt. Yoruko thinks that Griselda might have come back from the dead to get her revenge. This isn't very believable since ghosts aren't real. Yoruko is suddenly attacked from behind and seemingly dies. The characters should have kept the window closed when they were talking so other players couldn't kill them. Kirito sees a hooded player on the nearby roof and chases after him. However, the other player teleports away using a crystal before Kirito is able to do anything. Kirito goes back to the room with Asuna and Schmidt. Kirito is not sure what's going on, but he knows that ghosts aren't involved since they don't need a teleport crystal. Asuna later gives Kirito a sandwich to eat, but he accidentally drops it on the ground. The sandwich disappears since the durability was almost down to 0. Kirito then realizes the truth. Yoruko and Kynes actually faked their deaths by teleporting away at the exact moment when their items degraded. The animation looks the same, so it appears as if they died. This is yet another example of bad game design. Why would the teleport animation and item degrade animation look the exact same? People were clearly going to abuse this. And how did Kirito not come to this conclusion earlier? He's very knowledgeable about the game, so he should have known that the two animations are similar. Teleporting and item degradation are common occurrences in Sword Art Online, so Kirito should have been able to put two and two together. Asuna looks at her friend's list and tracks Yoruko's location. She's in the field on floor 19. Why didn't Asuna do this earlier? It would be obvious that Yoruko was alive if Asuna simply checked her friend's list. Kirito and Asuna could have also visited the Monument of Life in the Town of Beginnings to see if names were crossed out. In the meantime, Schmidt visits Griselda's grave. Yoruko and Kynes have disguised themselves as ghosts to interrogate Schmidt and see if he was responsible for Griselda's murder. Schmidt admits that he was involved but claims that he was innocent and didn't want Griselda to die. Suddenly, a guild of red players called the Laughing Coffin come to kill Yoruko, Kynes, and Schmidt. They could teleport away right now since this isn't an anti-crystal zone. Schmidt got paralyzed, but Yoruko and Kynes are just standing there and not doing anything. Kirito comes in the nick of time to save the characters. He lies and says how he has 30 players from the assault team coming, so the Laughing Coffin members are forced to retreat. Yoruko apologizes for tricking Kirito and says that she was going to tell him the truth later. Grimlock is nearby and Asuna has captured him. The powerful ring is actually in Grimlock's possession since married players share the same inventory in Sword Art Online. How did nobody realize this earlier? It should be obvious if the players knew the basic game mechanics of Sword Art Online. This marriage mechanic can easily be abusable. A player could marry someone else and then steal all their items by killing them. Grimlock confesses that he was the one who got Griselda killed. He hired some other players to commit the murder. It turns out that Grimlock and Griselda were married in real life as well, but Griselda was a completely different person in Sword Art Online. Grimlock didn't like how Griselda's personality changed in the game, so he had to kill her to settle for the memory of how she was. This is some extremely flawed logic. Grimlock could have just left Griselda if he didn't like her anymore. He didn't have to have her killed. It's not like Griselda's personality changed in real life, so she would probably be the same once they escape the death game. Also, as stated before, most murders are committed by a spouse in real life, and it turned out to be the case here as well. Kirito and Asuna should have started by investigating Grimlock. They didn't need to waste so much time doing all this other stuff. Yoruko, Kynes, and Schmidt then take Grimlock away since it's their problem to deal with now. Afterwards, Kirito and Asuna decide to head back to the front lines. They somehow see Griselda's ghost standing near her grave. So ghosts do exist in Sword Art Online, I guess. Asuna then asks Kirito if he wants to add her to his friends list. However, Kirito claims he's a solo player, but Kirito has been grouping up with people from the start. He played with Klein in episode 1, he partied with Asuna in episode 2, he joined the Moonlit Black Cats in episode 3, he teamed up with Silica in episode 4, and now Kirito was working with Asuna for the previous 2 episodes. Kirito is clearly not a solo player since he's not playing alone, so it doesn't make sense how Kirito constantly claims to be a solo player when he isn't one. There's another time skip and we move to floor 48. Asuna goes to her friend Lisbeth to get her weapon repaired. Lisbeth is a blacksmith and owns a shop. Kirito later visits Lisbeth's shop to request a custom-made sword. It makes sense why Kirito would need someone else to make him a sword. In typical MMORPGs, the best weapon come from boss drops. They aren't made by other players. However, the bosses don't drop anything in Sword Art Online, so the players will have to make their own weapons. Kirito shows Lisbeth his current sword, which is called the Elucidator, and he wants something that's the same quality or better. The Elucidator is able to destroy the strongest sword Lisbeth has forged. Lisbeth is angry but tells Kirito that she could make a bunch of strong swords if she had the right material. Lisbeth knows of a dragon that eats crystals on floor 55. According to the legends, it's supposed to store a rare metal in its body. Kirito says that he'll go alone to get the dragon crystal, but a master blacksmith needs to be nearby, so Lisbeth also has to come. This seems reasonable. In episode 4, Silica needed to be near the revival flower for it to bloom, so it makes sense how you would need a master blacksmith nearby to get the rare metal metal from the dragon's body. Kirito and Lisbeth go to floor 55, which is an icy mountain. Kirito gives Lisbeth a coat since it's very cold, but she should have prepared better. Lisbeth knows a lot about floor 55, so how did she not know what the setting was going to be? Furthermore, Lisbeth shouldn't have gone alone with Kirito. This could be a trick and Kirito could kill Lisbeth right now since this isn't a safe zone. Don't go to an unfamiliar place with someone you don't know. Kirito fights the dragon by himself, but Lisbeth comes out. She should have stayed hidden like Kirito said. The dragon attacks Lisbeth and Kirito tries to save her, but they both fall into a deep pit. Kirito and Lisbeth heal back to full health by drinking some potions. Then they look for a way out of the pit. They can't teleport out since this is an anti-crystal zone. There has to be another way out if this is an anti-crystal zone. Kirito tries to run up the wall, but it doesn't work. They could use their weapons as ice axes to climb out. Kirito and Lisbeth could just stay here till someone tracks them via their friends list. Kirito and Lisbeth camp out for the night and go to sleep since they're unable to find another way out of the pit. Kirito explains that he can't sit back and watch other people die. That's why he saved Lisbeth earlier. The next morning, Kirito has found the dragon crystal underneath the snow, so Lisbeth didn't need to tag along since Kirito was able to find the rare metal on his own. This pit is actually the dragon's nest. Dragons are nocturnal and the dragon comes back, so Kirito and Lisbeth ride it to escape out of the pit. They somehow survive the fall and end up back at Lisbeth's shop. Lisbeth uses the dragon crystal to forge a one-handed long sword for Kirito. It's called the Dark Repulsor. Kirito tries to pay Lisbeth, but she says that she doesn't actually need any money. Why would Lisbeth bother risking her life for a random stranger if she didn't need to? How does Lisbeth even keep this shop open for business if she's constantly doing things for free? It turns out that Lisbeth has fallen in love with Kirito and she attempts to confess her feelings to him. Why does every girl Kirito comes across end up falling in love with him? Asuna arrives and interrupts Kirito and Lisbeth. She was the one who recommended Kirito to come here and get the custom sword made. Lisbeth realizes that Kirito and Asuna are already in a relationship together. Lisbeth is heartbroken since she can't be with Kirito and runs away. Kirito finds Lisbeth crying underneath a bridge at a riverbank. He thanks her for the adventure they went on and realizes that their lives still have meaning in this virtual world. Lisbeth feels the same way and Kirito promises that he'll beat the game. Lisbeth offers to be Kirito's personal blacksmith if he ever needs his gear to be repaired. There's another time skip and Kirito is training on his own in a dungeon on floor 74. It would be much more efficient to train in a group so you can kill more monsters. The experience and money might be divided up amongst everyone in the group, but it should still be better than playing solo since you'll be able to kill way more monsters. Kirito then hunts down a rare ragu rabbit that drops high quality S-class meat. If this meat is so rare and valuable, then there should be way more players trying to hunt the ragu rabbit. In MMORPGs, lots of players will want to do the method that makes them the most money. Afterwards, Kirito goes to Aegil's shop on floor 50 and shows him the ragu rabbit meat. Kirito's cooking level isn't high enough to prepare the meat. If he tries, he'll just end up burning it. Kirito could sell the ragu rabbit meat if he's not going to use it himself. He can get a lot of money since it's so rare and valuable. Asuna suddenly walks into the shop. Kirito asks Asuna what her cooking skill is, and she says that she maxed it out last week. When did Asuna get the chance to max out her cooking skill though? She should be busy managing the Knights of the Blood Oath Guild, fighting on the front lines, planning strategy meetings, and defeating the floor bosses. How does she have the time to max out her cooking skill? It's not like cooking is an important skill since players can just eat bread if they have to. If it's this easy to max out your cooking skill, then why hasn't every other player in Sword Art Online done this as well? Kirito shows Asuna the ragu rabbit meat and promises to give her half if she cooks it. Kirito should also give Aegil a taste since they're friends. He shouldn't leave Aegil hanging like that. Asuna says that she has the necessary cooking equipment at her house, so they should go there to cook the meat. Asuna's escort, Kuradil, doesn't want her to go home alone with such a shady person like Kirito. However, Asuna says that Kirito is actually 10 levels higher than Kuradil. This is why you shouldn't be able to hide your level in the game. Kuradil wouldn't be so afraid of letting Asuna go with Kirito if he saw his real level. Plus, it's a safe zone, so it's not like Kirito is going to kill Asuna. Kuradil accuses Kirito of being a beater, but Asuna disregards what he said. Kirito's mistake in episode 2 still haunts him to this day. Instead of exacerbating the situation and accepting the hate, Kirito should have defended himself so that people in Sword Art Online wouldn't end up hating the beta testers. And why does Asuna need a bodyguard? She can take care of herself since she's at a high level. As long as Asuna doesn't leave the safe zones, there's no danger of dying. Having a bodyguard would attract unwanted attention and make you an even bigger target. Kirito and Asuna go to floor 61 together, which is where Asuna's house is located. You shouldn't spend so much money buying a house right now. The houses are going to be better the higher up you go, so wait until you get to a higher floor to buy a nice house. Kirito makes himself at home and Asuna cooks the ragu rabbit meat. Asuna decides to make stew since that's what ragu means. Asuna makes a few side dishes as well. Kirito and Asuna eat the food together. Asuna then mentions how she wants to go back to the real world since there are so many things she hasn't done yet. Kirito agrees and acknowledges that they shouldn't give up, but Kirito is a loner who stays in his room and plays video games all day. Additionally, in episode 1, Kirito even said that he felt more alive in Sword Art Online than in the real world. And in episode 5, he says that they should enjoy their time in Sword Art Online since they're not in the real world at the moment. So why does Kirito want to escape the game now? There's nothing waiting for him in the real world. Asuna then convinces Kirito to team up with her. Asuna knows that the beta testers don't fit in with the guilds, but she still wants to group up with Kirito since there are things that a solo player can't handle on their own. But it's Kirito's fault the beta testers don't fit in. Kirito insulted the other players and made it look like the beta testers were far superior, so he's responsible for the hate. Furthermore, Asuna should be teaming up with the players in her guild. What's the point of joining a guild if you're not going to party up with other players in that guild? And Kirito has been doing just fine on his own so far. He managed to somehow become incredibly high level and obtain all this good gear by himself. Kirito accepts Asuna's party invitation. He later leaves Asuna's house and waits for her in the plaza the next day so they can go to a dungeon and train together. Asuna is being stalked by Kuradil, and he refuses to leave her alone. Kirito duels Kuradil one-on-one and easily beats him. This was totally unnecessary. Kuradil is following orders from the guild. If Asuna has a problem with Kuradil, then she should talk with the guild leader. Furthermore, it shouldn't be hard to ditch Kuradil. Asuna could use a crystal and teleport somewhere else. If Asuna and Kuradil don't have each other on their friends list, then Kuradil wouldn't be able to track Asuna's location, and Asuna should be the one dueling Kuradil. She doesn't need Kirito to fight for her. Kirito and Asuna then go to the dungeon on floor 74 to train together. They map out the dungeon and discover the boss room. Kirito and Asuna decide to take a peek since boss monsters are never supposed to leave the room they guard. This is a bad choice. The door might close behind them and they would get locked inside, just like what happened to the moonlit black cats in episode 3. It could also be an anti-crystal zone, so their teleport crystals wouldn't work in here. Kirito and Asuna should wait until they're fully ready to enter the boss room. The floor 74 boss is named the Gleam Eyes. Kirito and Asuna get scared and quickly run out of the room. They're lucky they weren't locked inside. Afterwards, Kirito and Asuna sit down and take a moment to come up with a strategy to fight the Gleam Eyes. Asuna wonders why Kirito only uses a one-handed sword and not a shield. Asuna doesn't use a shield herself since it'll slow down her rapier. Asuna is also suspicious of Kirito since he's not using the sword he got from Lisbeth in episode 7. Kirito doesn't answer and Asuna lets him off the hook. Kirito could just lie and come up with an excuse. He doesn't have to tell Asuna anything. There are many legitimate reasons why players players don't use shields in MMORPGs. For example, one big reason is because a shield will lower the damage output. Only the tank should use shields for more defense, and Kirito is clearly not a tank. Asuna has prepared some sandwiches for herself and Kirito. Asuna explains that she trained and studied for a whole year, so she's able to use the in-game items to replicate sauces in the real world like mayonnaise and soy sauce. Again, how does Asuna have time for this? She should be busy doing a bunch of other stuff. Klein and his guild suddenly arrive in the dungeon. It's so convenient how Kirito constantly runs into Klein by chance. There are thousands of players in Sword Art Online, and yet Kirito doesn't seem to randomly bump into anyone else. Klein is surprised to see Kirito with a girl since he's a solo player, but Klein already saw how Kirito joined another guild in episode 3, so it shouldn't be such a shock to see Kirito teaming up with other players. Kirito introduces Klein and Asuna to each other. Another guild called the Aincrad Liberation Army shows up. The Lieutenant Korvats demands Kirito give up the map with directions to the boss room. Klein refuses since mapping is really hard. Kirito gives Korvats the map because they're all working towards the same goal of beating the death game as soon as possible. This was the right decision. The players should be working together. Plus, the Aincrad Liberation Army shares their information and resources with civilian players all the time, so it's only fair to share your information with them as well. Kirito is already rich, so it's not like he needs the extra money right now. Korvats and the Aincrad Liberation Army leave, but Kirito warns them not to enter the boss room. They won't be able to beat the boss right now since the troops are so exhausted. Kirito is right. You shouldn't try to fight a floor boss when your party isn't ready. Waiting a few hours won't make a big difference. And how do the Aincrad Liberation Army members see anything? They don't have any eye holes in their helmet, and you play in a first-person point of view. Kirito and Asuna train together with Klein and his guild, but they hear screaming coming from the boss room. The characters run to the floor 74 boss room and find out that the Aincrad Liberation Army have gone in. It's an anti-crystal zone, so they can't teleport out. Kirito remembers how the Moonlit Black Cats died in a similar way since they couldn't teleport out of the room. Korvats attacks the Gleam Eyes, but he ends up getting killed. This was his own fault. Kirito tried to warn Korvats not to enter the boss room, but he didn't listen. This is why you shouldn't rush into things. It would be better to wait until they weren't tired and try to recruit a bunch more players for the boss fight. Kirito, Asuna, and Klein can't stand there and watch other players get killed, so they run into the room and attack the Gleam Eyes to save the rest of the Aincrad Liberation Army. This was not a wise decision. If the other players get killed, then that's on them. Kirito, Asuna, and Klein shouldn't risk their own lives to save these other people. They already did what they could to prevent the Aincrad Liberation Army from entering the boss room, but they didn't listen to them. So it's not their problem anymore, just like how it's not the beta testers' fault other players died. Moreover, the Aincrad Liberation Army members could have simply run out of the room like what Kirito and Asuna did earlier. Why are they standing there and doing nothing? The door is wide open, so it's not like they're trapped inside the room. Kirito and Asuna are losing pretty badly against the Gleam Eyes. Kirito reveals his secret unique skill, dual wielding. He equips the dark repulsor sword Lisbeth made for him along with his elucidator and easily defeats the Gleam Eyes on his own using his Starburst stream attack. Kirito is way too overpowered. One player shouldn't be able to beat a floor boss by themselves. If Kirito can do this, then there's nothing he can't do. He's pretty much invincible at this point. Floor bosses are designed for a group of players to defeat, not one guy. And if Kirito had such a powerful skill, then why didn't he use it immediately at the start of the fight? He could have rushed into the boss room and used it before Korvats died. But instead, Kirito waited for several innocent players to die before revealing his dual wielding skill. It doesn't really make much sense. And Kirito isn't the only one with a dual wielding skill. Back in episode 4, we saw how one of the Titan's Hand guild members was wielding two axes at the same time. So unless that was an animation error, dual wielding is not a unique skill. skill. Furthermore, Kirito dealt the last attack on the Gleam Eyes, so why didn't he receive a last attack bonus item like what happened when he defeated Ilfang, the Kobold Lord? Klein asks Kirito about his dual-wielding skill, and he explains that it's an extra skill he picked up. It just randomly popped up in his skill menu about 6 months ago. Kirito kept his unique skill a secret because other players would be jealous of him, but most players already hate Kirito, so why does he care about them being jealous of him? The ones who don't hate Kirito aren't jealous of his unique skill, so there's no reason why Kirito kept it a secret for so long. Additionally, there's an unlimited amount of skills in Sword Art Online, so how are they so sure that Kirito is the only one with a dual-wielding skill? If there really is an unlimited amount of skills in the game, then a lot of players would have a unique or special skill. It's not like one player can have every single skill in the game, and there should also be skills like triple wielding or quadruple wielding. Kirito's dual wielding unique skill wouldn't be so special compared to that. How many unique skills are even in the game? Would it be possible for every player to get one? If not, then unique skills are another example of bad game design. It's unfair to give one player something special. Moreover, unique skills aren't balanced in terms of PvP. How are you supposed to fight another player with a unique skill and win if you don't have a unique skill yourself? Asuna decides to take a leave of absence from her guild since she doesn't want to leave Kirito. This is a bad decision. Being part of the best guild in the game is way better than teaming up with a loser like Kirito. There's a huge problem. Heathcliff, the leader of the Knights of the Blood Oath Guild, won't allow Asuna to leave on her own. If Kirito wants Asuna to leave the guild, then he'll have to duel Heathcliff in combat and win. If Kirito loses, then he also has to join the Knights of the Blood Oath. What kind of deal is this? Players in Sword Art Online should be able to leave a guild whenever they feel like it. Asuna shouldn't have to get permission from the guild leader. Why do you have to go through such a complicated process? And why is Kirito fighting on Asuna's behalf? Asuna is strong enough to fight for herself. She doesn't need Kirito to constantly protect her and fight for her. Kirito accepts the offer and duels Heathcliff. It turns out that Heathcliff also has a unique skill called the Divine Blade. It maximizes his offensive and defensive moves. Nobody has ever seen Heathcliff's HP dip down into the yellow zone before. That seems pretty suspicious. Kirito attempts to strike Heathcliff, but he manages to parry it and win the duel. Heathcliff had to cheat though, since Kirito's reaction speed was way too fast. How do the other players not see this? It should be clear that time has somehow slowed down. Moreover, there's no time limit during the duel, so Kirito could evade all of Heathcliff's attacks and wait for him to tire out since he's wearing a lot of armor and the shield is really heavy. The previous episode showed that the players in Sword Art Online can get exhausted, and it should be pretty obvious that Heathcliff is hiding something. First, nobody has ever seen his HP drop down into the yellow zone, and now Heathcliff somehow broke the game and cheated against Kirito. Since Kirito lost the duel, he's now forced to join the Knights of the Blood Oath. Kirito tells Asuna about the Moonlit Black Cats since she asked him why he avoids guilds and people, but Kirito doesn't avoid other people. He partied with Asuna to solve the mystery a few episodes ago. Kirito has to go on a training mission with Kuradil. They're all in the same guild now, so it's time to bury the hatchet. Since this is a test, the party leader Godfrey forces Kirito and Kuradil to hand over all the crystals in their storage, even their teleport crystals. This is a dumb decision. You should always have some crystals ready so you can teleport out of a dangerous scenario or heal yourself back to full health. You don't want to take any chances in this death game. Kirito should leave a crystal or two in his storage. Your inventory in Sword Art Online isn't public knowledge unless you're married to someone else, so it's not like Godfrey is going to know if Kirito has any crystals left in his storage. Kirito, Godfrey, and Kuradil go through a canyon to a dungeon on floor 55. The characters stop to take a break. They're about to eat a meal, but it turns out that Kuradil has tainted the water to paralyze Kirito and Godfrey. Why is this an actual game mechanic? If Sword Art Online wasn't a death game and the players weren't trapped inside the game, then they could simply eat real food food in the real world. They don't have to care about what food they eat in the game since it doesn't matter. They would just eat whatever food provides the best buffs and/or heals the most. There's no function for the poisoning food mechanic if Sword Art Online was supposed to be a normal MMORPG. This is also why you should prepare your own meal so other people can't tamper with your food and water. Kirito shouldn't be so trusting of others. Kuradil murders Godfrey and is about to kill Kirito as well. Kuradil reveals that he's actually a member of the Laughing Coffin Guild. How can a player be in two guilds at the same time? If Kuradil is part of the Laughing Coffin Guild, then he shouldn't be able to join the Knights of the Blood Oath. It should be apparent that Kuradil is part of the Laughing Coffin Guild since he's supposed to have a guild icon next to his name. Moreover, Godfrey could have just instantly teleported away. Instead of going for an antidote crystal, he should have just used a teleport crystal. This is also why you should have some extra crystals in your storage. You never know when things like this might happen. You need to prepare for everything. Asuna arrives in the nick of time to save Kirito, and she gives him a crystal to heal him back to full health. Asuna was tracking Kirito's position on the map the whole time and noticed that something was wrong when Godfrey disappeared from the map. Kuradil pretends to surrender to Asuna, but he tries to attack her instead. However, Kirito somehow recovers from his paralysis and kills Kuradil before he's able to attack Asuna. How did Kirito magically overcome the paralysis? The crystal didn't get rid of the paralysis, so Kirito should still be paralyzed right now. Furthermore, Asuna shouldn't have let her guard down. It was clear that Kuradil was trying to trick her, so Asuna should have killed Kuradil when she had the chance. It's self-defense, so Asuna shouldn't feel guilty about killing Kuradil. Kirito and Asuna kiss. They promise to never leave each other and protect one another no matter what happens. Kirito asks to stay at Asuna's place for the night and she agrees. They have dinner together at Asuna's house and afterwards, Kirito tells Asuna that they should get married. They also decide to leave the front lines for a while since they're scared of dying. Kirito recommends getting a house together by the lake on floor 22. Well, that escalated quickly. A few episodes ago, Kirito and Asuna hated each other. Now they're getting married and going on a honeymoon. Kirito and Asuna shouldn't leave the front lines. They need to focus on beating the death game as soon as possible. This isn't all fun and games. People need to get back to the real world and return to their normal lives. And why is Kirito so afraid of dying? He was able to take on a floor boss by himself. If he can do this, then it's going to be very difficult for him to die, as long as he doesn't get tricked by someone else. Kirito and Asuna tell Heathcliff what happened with Kuradil and Godfrey. They also ask for a temporary leave of absence from the guild since they need some time off. This time, Heathcliff allows it. How nice of him. All it took was a near-death experience for it to happen. Kirito and Asuna purchase a log cabin near a lake on floor 22. This is a big downgrade since Asuna's house on floor 61 was way better. This log cabin doesn't even have a kitchen with any cooking equipment. Kirito and Asuna shouldn't have spent all their money buying this log cabin. Kirito wonders if their relationship only exists in the virtual world, but Asuna says that her feelings for him are real. Asuna promises to also find Kirito in the real world and fall in love with him all over again. A lot of couples in real life actually met each other in a video game, but later decided to meet and get married, so this does seem like something that could actually happen. Kirito and Asuna go on a walk in the forest near the log cabin. They find a little girl in a white dress. The girl is unconscious, but she doesn't have a cursor, so she's not a player. Kirito and Asuna bring the girl back to their log cabin. It's convenient how they just happen to have two separate beds. Kirito determines that the girl is not an NPC since they didn't have any trouble moving her here. Kirito and Asuna shouldn't waste their time with this. They need to get back to the front lines and fight the bosses. They already had a lot of fun on their honeymoon, so it's time to get back to work. The next day, the girl wakes up. She says her name is Yui, but she can't remember anything else. Yui refers to Kirito and Asuna as her parents. They should tell her the truth. What if Yui actually had had real parents. After eating breakfast, Kirito and Asuna take Yui to the Town of Beginnings to try and see if she'll remember anything. Kirito mentions how there are about 6,000 players still alive in Sword Art Online, and about 30% of them live in the Town of Beginnings, so it's less than 2,000 people. As stated before, staying in the Town of Beginnings is a good strategy if you want a guaranteed way of surviving the death game. You don't have to leave and risk your life fighting the monsters or bosses. Kirito and Asuna find some Aincrad Liberation Army members harassing a daycare worker named Sasha. Asuna scares the Aincrad Liberation Army off. This is a safe zone though, so they shouldn't be so scared since they can't die. Asuna is somehow able to knock the Aincrad Liberation Army members off their feet. This shouldn't be possible. Players shouldn't be able to attack each other in a safe zone at all. If you can still scare people in the safe zone and knock them off their feet, then this could totally be abused by the players. Yui starts to panic and glitches out before being rendered unconscious again. Sasha brings Kirito, Asuna, and Yui to the daycare center inside the church. Sasha decided to help the kids since they were dealing with a lot of psychological trauma. She walks through the Town of Beginnings every day to look for kids who need help. Why are there so many kids playing Sword Art Online in the first place? Even without it being a death game, there has to be some kind of age restriction since there's a lot of adult stuff in Sword Art Online. If you've ever read Sword Art Online Chapter 16.5, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Plus, the Nerf gear device is probably really expensive, so I'm not sure how the kids can afford it. Kirito and Asuna explain why they came here with Yui. Unfortunately, Sasha says that she's never seen Yui before. Another player named Yulier comes to visit the church. She's the second in command of the Aincrad Liberation Army. Yulier thanks Asuna for putting the men in their place yesterday. Yulier came here to ask for Kirito and Asuna's help. The leader of the Aincrad Liberation Army, Thinker, is trapped in a dungeon on the first floor. It's an anti-crystal zone, so he can't teleport out. Thinker was overthrown by Kibao and his group 3 days ago. I'm surprised that Kibao is still alive after all this time. I would have expected him to go full Leroy Jenkins and die from doing something stupid. It turns out that Kibao is the one who sent Korvats and the others to the front lines. Why do people even listen to Kibao? He's an idiot who shouldn't be taken seriously. Kirito and Asuna agreed to help rescue Thinker. It's so convenient how two of the most powerful players in Sword Art Online just happened to come to the Town of Beginnings at the exact time Thinker needed to be saved. What would happen if Kirito and Asuna didn't come here? Yui mentions how Yulier is telling the truth, so Kirito and Asuna don't need to have any doubts about her. This wouldn't be enough confirmation for me. I would make sure that Yulier 100% isn't lying before rushing into things. This could be a trick to lure Kirito and Asuna out of the safe zone. You don't want to risk anything in this death game. Yulier could pull out her friends list and show Thinker's location on the map. Yui insists on tagging along with Kirito, Asuna, and Yulier. This is a bad choice. She should stay here at the daycare with Sasha instead of going into a dangerous dungeon. Kirito and Asuna should also study the guidebooks before going to the dungeon. They've never been to this dungeon before, so they need to know what to expect. And why would such a huge dungeon exist underneath the Town of Beginnings? The dungeon should get harder the higher up you go. Kirito kills several frog monsters and gets a bunch of meat. However, Asuna throws it away. This was a big waste. Kirito and Asuna could have just sold the meat if they weren't going to cook it and eat it themselves. The characters eventually find Thinker in a safe room, but a high-level boss named the Fatal Scythe appears and attacks them. Thinker could have sent a private message to Yulier and warned her about the Fatal Scythe. Kirito and Asuna try to fight the Fatal Scythe, but it's way too strong. Why does such a powerful boss monster exist in a dungeon like this? Kirito even said how it's similar to a boss on the higher floors. How are the players on floor 1 supposed to defeat the Fatal Scythe? And how did Thinker make it past the Fatal Scythe to get to the safe room? Furthermore, Kirito and Asuna don't need to fight the Fatal Scythe. They can simply teleport out now. They found Thinker, so their job is complete. Thinker and Yulier teleport away using their crystals. But didn't Yulier say that it was an anti-crystal zone inside the room? Also, did Thinker have a teleport crystal this whole time? If so, why didn't he use it to get out of here? Gear. Yui faces off against the fatal scythe alone and destroys it on her own with a ball of fire. Yui suddenly remembers everything now. It turns out that she's an artificial intelligence mental health counseling program that was designed to assist the players in Sword Art Online. However, the game's cardinal program banned Yui from interacting with anyone, so she was forced to only watch all the players in Sword Art Online and feel their negative emotions. What's the point of designing a mental health counseling program if you're not going to use it? Even without it being a death game, a mental health counseling program would be an important feature in an MMORPG. One day, Yui saw how Kirito and Asuna were happy and joyful in Sword Art Online. That's why she wanted to get close to them and meet them. But Kirito and Asuna aren't the only happy players in Sword Art Online. In episode 4, we saw many happy couples when Kirito and Silica visited the flower garden. Additionally, there were many happy fishermen at the lake near Kirito and Asuna's log cabin. Why didn't Yui want to meet those players as well? Yui had to use her admin credentials to delete the fatal scythe. Since she disobeyed the Cardinal System's directive, Yui is now scheduled for deletion. If the Cardinal System deletes programs that disobey its orders, then why didn't it detect Yui the exact moment she stepped out of line and encountered Kirito and Asuna in the forest? That wasn't supposed to happen since Yui wasn't allowed to actually interact with any of the players. Why did it take so long for the Cardinal System to notice Yui? Kirito and Asuna are very sad about losing Yui. Why are they so heartbroken? Kirito and Asuna literally found Yui less than 2 days ago. They barely even know her. It's not like they were a real family or anything. Kirito uses the emergency console in the room to hack into the game and convert Yui's data into an in-game item. There are so many things wrong with this scene. First of all, how does Kirito know how to hack into the game? You actually need a lot of knowledge and skills to hack into another computer system. There's no way Kirito has that. You just don't randomly press a bunch of buttons like what Kirito did in the show. Second, how did Kirito create this item from scratch? It's not like this item existed in the game before, since the mental health counseling programs weren't allowed to interact with the players. So how did Kirito do this? He would have had to create the code himself, and Yui's code is very big since she's a complicated artificial intelligence program. How did Kirito convert that massive amount of code into an in-game item so quickly? Third, why is there an emergency console in this room? The game admin shouldn't even need a physical in-game console to do their job. They should be able to do everything in their menus. Fourth, why didn't Kirito simply re-enable the logout button? That would be much easier than converting Yui's data into an in-game item. Kirito had the chance to save thousands of lives, but he didn't do that for some reason. Fifth, what's the point of killing Yui if she's just going to be brought back later on? This cheapens the threat of death from a narrative standpoint and undercuts all the tension in the show. Kirito says that he stored Yui's data in his nerve gear, so she's clearly coming back later. Asuna turns the item, called Yui's heart, into a necklace and wears it. There's another time skip and Kirito is fishing near the lake. He encounters a player named Nishida, who's also an avid fisherman. The company that Nishida works for in real life was in charge of network security for Sword Art Online. Nishida could use that knowledge and hack into the game to re-enable the logout button. Kirito could tell Nishida about the emergency console in the safe room and he could use it to hack the game. Nishida's fishing skill is high, but the problem is that he can't really cook the fish he catches. Kirito invites Nishida over and Asuna cooks all the fish they caught for dinner. Why doesn't Nishida just level up his own cooking skill? He's not part of the assault team and fighting on the front lines, so Nishida should have plenty of extra time to train his cooking skill. During the meal, Nishida tells Kirito and Asuna about a huge fish that he tried to catch many times before, but always ended up failing. Kirito agrees to help Nishida catch the fish tomorrow. We already know that Kirito is stupidly overpowered, so he should be able to easily catch the fish. Nishida manages to hook the fish and passes the rod to Kirito so he can reel it in. The fish is actually a huge monster and Asuna defeats it on her own. The fish didn't even drop anything though, so what was the point of all this? It's not like the characters gained any items, money, or experience, so it was a big waste of time. Kirito then receives a private message from Heathcliff. He needs Kirito and Asuna back on the front lines. Before leaving their vacation, Asuna explains to Nishida why she fell in love with Kirito. He was the one who taught her how to live life to the fullest. Kirito and Asuna go to the Knights of the Blood Oath's headquarters. players. Heathcliff tells them that the recon team was wiped out. They were killed by the Floor 75 boss after being trapped inside the room, which is also an anti-crystal zone. So if you can't teleport or run out of the boss room from now on, then that means your only options are to kill the boss or die. The player should train more and get better gear. Don't go into the boss room unless you're absolutely certain you can kill the boss. If this was a normal MMORPG, the players would just respawn, so it's not a big deal. But in Sword Art Online, they only have one chance to defeat the bosses or they die for good. Kirito tells Asuna to stay here where it's safe instead of going to the boss fight. However, Asuna disagrees. She can't live without Kirito and would if Kirito didn't come back. If Kirito and Asuna don't want to die, then they should just stay in the safe zone. They aren't forced to fight any bosses and risk their lives. It's then explained how all the players' bodies are deteriorating in the real world. They were moved to hospitals, and that's where they've been kept for the past 2 years. The players need to beat the game and escape soon since they're barely being kept alive by machines. They won't be able to survive like that for much longer. Everyone is on a time limit. What about the players who were living alone though? How would anyone know to transfer them to the hospital? Kirito lived with his mom and sister, so it would be easy to inform the police. But what about the other players who live by themselves like Klein? How would the police track those players down? Additionally, if Kirito and Asuna knew about this time limit, then there should have been a bigger sense of urgency. Why did they waste so much time in the previous episodes doing pointless things that didn't matter? For example, instead of going on a honeymoon, they should have focused on leveling up and beating the death game as quickly as they could. Kirito and Asuna meet up with Klein in a guild. A bunch of high-level players from the other top guilds in Sword Art Online come to fight the Floor 75 boss together, which is called the Skull Reaper. The players should hold a meeting and discuss a strategy first before going into the boss room. They need to be way more prepared than this and have a plan of attack. Several players are immediately killed by the Skull Reaper. It's pretty unfair how the Skull Reaper is able to kill players in one hit. This is why they needed to level up and get a higher battle healing skill. The players worked together and somehow managed to defeat the Skull Reaper without any of the important characters dying. Once again, there's no last attack bonus item. Why don't the other bosses have these? We've only seen Ilfang the Kobold Lord drop a bonus item. 14 players died in total from the Skull Reaper fight. Kirito remembers how Heathcliff cheated during their duel. Kirito attacks Heathcliff and it turns out that he's actually Akihiko Kayaba. How did it take this long for the players to discover Heathcliff's true identity? Heathcliff is even more overpowered than Kirito, so it should have been obvious that something was up. There's a reason why nobody has ever seen Heathcliff's HP dip down into the yellow zone before, and if Akihiko Kayaba is also taking part in this death game, then that means that his body is unconscious in the real world. He definitely hasn't been moved to a hospital, so someone else is taking care of him. It has to be someone Akihiko Kayaba knows and trusts, so the police should track down all of Akihiko Kayaba's friends and family members. They could interrogate them to find out Akihiko Kayaba's location. Kirito mentions how it's boring to watch other people play games, so that's how he knew Akihiko Kayaba had to be a player in Sword Art Online, but that's totally not true. Look at all the millions of people who watch live streams on Twitch or Let's Play videos on YouTube. Akihiko Kayaba mentions he's actually the final boss on the top floor. Akihiko Kayaba then paralyzes all the players in the room except for Kirito. As a reward for discovering Akihiko Kayaba's identity, Kirito is given a chance to fight him right now, one-on-one. Akihiko Kayaba will deactivate his immortality and system assist to make it a fair fight. If Kirito is able to defeat Akihiko Kayaba, then he will clear the game and all the players will be able to freely log out, no strings attached. Kirito should definitely take this offer. As we saw in the previous episode, all the players in Sword Art Online are living on borrowed time. It's only going to get get more difficult from here on out, and it took the players over 2 years to get to floor 75. It would probably take another 2 years to make it to floor 100, and the characters don't have time for that. Plus, there's the possibility of dying. The players need to escape the death game right now. Kirito accepts the offer and fights Akihiko Kayaba, but he's outmatched. Kirito shouldn't be relying on his dual-wielding skill. Akihiko Kayaba designed the game, so he knows all the combos. Kirito has to come up with a strategy that's never been used before, so Akihiko Kayaba won't be able to predict his moves. Kirito could use one-handed sword skills with each hand and alternate between them, and there are unlimited amount of skills in Sword Art Online. Kirito could use another secret skill and defeat Akihiko Kayaba. Kirito should honestly cheat and throw a poison dagger at Akihiko Kayaba to paralyze him, like what happened to Schmidt in episode 6. Akihiko Kayaba promised to make it a fair fight, but Kirito didn't promise anything, so he should take advantage of this opportunity. And just like their previous duel, Kirito can evade all of Akihiko Kayaba's attacks and wait for him to tire out. There's no time limit during this duel. Akihiko Kayaba is about to deal the finishing blow to Kirito, but Asuna somehow magically overcomes her paralysis and jumps in between them. She sacrifices herself to protect Kirito. This is why Kirito should have kept the revival item from episode 3. He could use it now to bring Asuna back to life since it's within 10 seconds of her death. Also, how did Asuna get rid of her paralysis? It already didn't make sense when Kirito did it in episode 10. Akihiko Kayaba even mentions that he's sure that he didn't design a way for players to neutralize their own paralysis, so this is a pretty big plot hole. And why is it that when a random background player dies, they're immediately disintegrated, but when an important character dies, time literally slows down and they're always able to give an emotional speech to Kirito? Asuna's rapier is left behind, which makes sense since married players in Sword Art Online share an inventory together. Kirito is stricken with grief and has lost the will to live, so Akihiko Kayaba finally kills him. However, Kirito pulls a Neo and wills himself back to life. Kirito also kills Akihiko Kayaba with Asuna's rapier and beats the death game once and for all. It doesn't really make much sense how Kirito was able to resurrect himself. There are rules and limitations in this game. You shouldn't be able to do whatever you want. Kirito should have held on for a bit longer and killed Akihiko Kayaba without dying first. He was really close to winning, so he shouldn't have given up like that. Kirito and Asuna find themselves floating on a platform over Aincrad. How are they both still alive right now? The nerve gear should have destroyed their brains since they both died in the game. They weren't brought back to life with a revival item or anything. It's convenient how the main characters in this anime get special treatment. Akihiko Kayaba is also there. He tells Kirito and Asuna that all the data is being deleted from the drive since the game has been cleared. In about 10 minutes, everything will disappear forever. 6,147 players survived the game and they were all logged out, but the other players who died in the game are truly gone for good. Kirito asks Akihiko Kayaba what's the point and why he did this, but he says that he can't remember. Are you serious? Akihiko Kayaba doesn't have a single reason for trapping 10,000 players in Sword Art Online and making it a death game? That's some bad writing. The author could have made Akihiko Kayaba's motivations similar to James Halliday from Ready Player One. James Halliday never felt at home in the real world and he didn't know how to connect with other people. Akihiko Kayaba bids Kirito and Asuna farewell and congratulates them on beating the game. Afterwards, Kirito and Asuna tell each other their real names and ages. Asuna's real name is Asuna Yuki. Kirito turned 16 last month, and Asuna is 17. They should also tell each other where they live to narrow it down a bit more. There are over 125 million people living in Japan, so even with a name, it might be hard to track someone since other people could have the same name as them. Kirito and Asuna embrace as the world falls apart. Finally, the anime anime ends with Kirito waking up in a hospital in the real world. He takes his nerve gear off and gets out of his bed to look for Asuna. How is Kirito able to walk right away? He was bedridden for over 2 years, so his limbs wouldn't be able to function properly. It would take months of rehabilitation to be able to walk again.
And that's it for the analysis of this arc. It's bad, really bad, but somehow the arcs only get worse from here. I don't get how anyone can like Sword Art Online when there are so many better video game anime out there. People could be watching shows with actual depth, good characters, and plots that make sense, yet somehow SAO is what they pick. Standards must have seriously dropped.
What did you think of Sword Art Online? Let me know your opinion. I personally thought it was pretty disappointing. The premise was interesting, but the execution left a lot to be desired. It's the perfect example of wasted potential, and overall, it was a big letdown.
SAO has got to be the biggest waste of potential in anime history. This show had an awesome premise of being trapped in an immersive virtual reality game where death in the game means death in real life. But instead of giving us a gripping, intense story, it quickly turns into a cringy mess of bad writing, shallow characters, and overused cliches. What could have been an epic tale of survival and strategy is ruined by lazy storytelling. It's a sad, frustrating disappointment that fails to live up to its amazing concept. Even if you're a fan of SAO for whatever reason, you have to admit that it's nowhere near as good as it should have been.
Hopefully, the progressive movie will be a lot better. Which movie or anime should I do next? Leave a suggestion. Be sure to also check out some of the other videos on this channel. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.